4-all. Center court at SoBe Stadium is a wall of blue, white, and red, thousands of Philippine flags moving in the humid Toronto air, the chant of "EALA'S, EALA'S" rolling steadily down from the upper deck. But something is wrong. Alycia is not moving like herself. The footwork that carried her through 7 straight matches, the explosive first step that has made her one of the most watchable players in the sport, is a fraction slower than it should be. She glances down anxiously at her right foot between points. On the other side of the net, Belinda Bencic sees it too. This was supposed to be the easy part of the story. Leylah had arrived in Toronto fresh off the biggest win of her career, a maiden Water Tour title at the Mubadala DC Open, where she beat world number 3 Jessica Pegula in the final. She carried that momentum into the National Bank Open with a career-high ranking of number 20, a 7-match winning streak, and wins over 3 Grand Slam champions and an Olympic gold medalist already banked in a single season. The Filipino community had turned a Canadian tennis stadium into something close to a home crowd, flags waving, her name chanted between points as though this were Manila and not Ontario. Everything had gone right. Until the 9th game of the first set, when Bencic broke her serve, held her own, and closed it out 6-4. The question hanging over the rest of this match was no longer whether Leylah could win it. It was whether her body would let her try. Go back 3 days to a match against Caty McNally that never should have gotten this dangerous. Leylah opened her Toronto campaign with a hard-fought 3-set win over Alycia, then walked straight into another battle against American Caty McNally in the 3rd round. She took the first set comfortably, 6-3. Midway through the second, chasing a forehand, she planted her right foot wrong and rolled her ankle. She called for the trainer. It was taped on court, and somehow she kept playing, dropping the second set in a tight 7-5 finish before digging in for a third, closing it out 6-4 to stretch her winning streak to 7 matches. Someone in the crowd, she said afterward, had shouted that they wanted to be Filipino for the night. It was a small line, but a telling one. She was no longer just playing in front of her own community. She was pulling strangers into it, one match at a time, feeding off whatever they gave back to her, turning casual spectators in a foreign country into something closer to family for 90 minutes at a time. That is not a small thing to build in a single tournament. And it is part of why the crowd at SoBe Stadium sounded the way it did every time she stepped on court that week. In the press conference, she waved the ankle away. Nothing wrong with it, she said, no serious problems. But she did not hide the toll the week had taken. I am as tired as one can be at this stage. You can imagine a lot of matches, but that's the job. I'm ready, she said, and added that she had a great team behind her and high hopes for the rest of the tournament. It was easy to believe her. She had said things like it before and backed them up on court, again and again all season. But look at what that week had actually asked of her. The Washington final had run long, spilling from Sunday into Monday on rain delays. From there, straight to Toronto, a 3-set win over Parks, doubles alongside Venus Williams, then the ankle scare against McNally, all inside 7 days. Whatever the press conference smile suggested, her body had been asked to do an enormous amount of work in very little time, on hard courts, against opponents who only got harder, with barely a day between matches to recover. And waiting for her in the round of 16 was exactly the kind of opponent built to punish that. Belinda Bencic is a former world number 4 and a Tokyo Olympic gold medalist. She won this same tournament back in 2015, unseeded, 18 years old, beating 4 former world number 1s on the way, Serena Williams among them in the semi-final, to become the youngest woman ever to lift the trophy in Toronto. The years since have not been easy. A serious wrist surgery that cost her months on tour. Then, more recently, motherhood. Bencic stepped away in 2023, gave birth to her daughter Bella, and did not return to competition until October 2024, her ranking having fallen outside the world's top 400 by the time she came back. She rebuilt from there almost from scratch, climbing back into the top 15 inside a single season, playing with the freedom of someone who has already learned that a ranking can be lost and rebuilt, that nothing about this sport is guaranteed. She carried something else into this match too. Since her comeback began in 2024, she had not lost a single time to a left-handed opponent. 9 straight wins over lefties heading into this one. Leylah, a lefty whose entire game leans hard on the angles and disguised pace that give right-handers trouble, would need her legs, her serve, and her movement at their absolute sharpest to be the exception. Instead, she had an ankle that had never really been given the chance to heal. The first set told the story in miniature. Both players held serve through the early exchanges, physical, probing rallies, neither side giving ground. Bencic pulled ahead 4-2 early. For a moment it looked like it might get away from EALA early. Then she found something. 4-all, and the crowd came to its feet, roaring in a way that briefly made SoBe Stadium sound louder than a fourth-round match had any right to. For a few minutes, it felt like Manila had followed her north, but Bencic had stood in bigger moments than this one. She broke serve in the 9th game, held her own to close it out, first set to her, 6-4, in just over half an hour. The second set is where the wheels came off completely. EALA'S movement, already compromised, grew heavier with every exchange, slower to the ball, slower out of her turns, and the shots that had been finding the lines all week started sailing wide or catching the net. Bencic did not need to do anything spectacular. She kept the ball in play, moved EALA corner to corner, and let the ankle do the rest. Broken immediately. Broken again soon after. 5 games up before EALA, credit to her, saved a string of match points in one last flare of resistance. It was not enough. Her first serve, usually one of her sharpest weapons, went missing at the worst possible time, and the second set vanished in barely half an hour, 6-0. The whole match lasted just 73 minutes. Startlingly quick, given Bencic had needed more than 3 hours to get past Taylor Townsend the round before. It was EALA'S first straight sets loss since a round of 32 defeat at the Bad Homburg Open, and it snapped the longest winning streak of her entire career. More than once during the match, she paused to check on the same right ankle she had rolled against McNally 3 days earlier. Whatever had happened in that match had not healed in the time since. It had simply been waiting for a bigger stage to reappear on. There was no collapse, no meltdown, no excuses from her side of the net. She fought to the final point, the way she always does. But this was a version of EALA that Toronto had not seen all week. A step behind, unable to find the burst that had carried her past Parks and McNally, and before Toronto, past Zheng Qinwen, Naomi Osaka, Elina Svitolina, Leylah Fernandez, and Pegula on the way to her first title in Washington. Bencic, for her part, was gracious in front of a crowd that had clearly not come for her. She thanked the fans for the atmosphere, admitted most of the noise had been for her opponent, and moved on to a quarter-final date with 4th seed Coco Gauff, her streak against left-handers now standing at 10. For a player who had spent the better part of 2 years fighting her way back from outside the top 400, it was one more piece of proof that the comeback was complete, and EALA, whatever else this loss cost her, had run into an opponent playing with nothing left to prove and nothing left to fear. It is worth remembering, in a moment like this, where all of it came from. EALA'S game was built year after year at the Rafa Nadal Academy in Mallorca, far from home, training in a system built on repetition and discipline rather than shortcuts. That is the foundation that let a wild card from the Philippines break into the world's top 30, beat multiple top 10 players, and stand across the net from a Grand Slam finalist in Washington and walk away with the trophy. One lopsided set in Toronto does not undo any of that. If anything, it explains it. An athlete who has spent her career absorbing pressure and turning it into growth simply ran out of runway for 1 week against one opponent at one tournament. Underneath the scoreline, the numbers still tell a quieter, better story. A 4th-round finish here, stacked on top of a maiden title in Washington, pushes her closer to a US Open seeding that would have sounded absurd at the start of the season, back when she was still fighting her way out of qualifying draws. So, was this the moment it all ran out? Watch her walk off that court, head up, acknowledging every corner of a crowd that had come for her, and the answer is written in how she leaves as much as how she lost. There is real time to recover before Cincinnati, and beyond that, the US Open, where she arrives with a career-high ranking, a maiden title already in the bag, and a harder-earned understanding of exactly what her body can survive in a single week on the road. Toronto did not prove she is fragile. It proved that even the most electric runs carry a cost, and that the players who last are the ones who learn that lesson early rather than late. That is, in the end, the real difference between the two women who walked off center court that morning. One of them has already lost a ranking, rebuilt it from outside the top 400, and learned exactly how much a body and a career can absorb before either one gives out. The other is only now finding out. EALA has spent this season collecting the kind of wins that take most players years to assemble. A maiden title, victories over 3 major champions, a first WTA 1000 quarterfinal appearance within reach before an ankle and a brutal schedule caught up with her at the worst possible moment. Toronto did not take any of that away. It simply added a chapter she had not written yet, the one where the price of a magical few weeks finally comes due and she has to figure out, on the road to Cincinnati and New York, how to keep chasing history without spending everything she has to get there. Alycia's story does not end at 6-4, 6-love on a Monday morning in Toronto. It simply turns the page. For more on her journey to Cincinnati and beyond, subscribe and stay with us for what comes next.